You sit down to a meal you enjoy. Maybe it is a bowl of pasta. You eat, you feel fine. And then an hour later something shifts. Your energy drops suddenly. Your hands feel slightly shaky. What you are describing has a name. It is called reactive hypoglycemia. And it is one of the most common yet least discussed metabolic experiences among adults in their 50s and 60s. Take Margaret, for example. She is 62 years old, lives in suburban Florida, and has been managing pre-diabetes with metformin for the past couple of years. Margaret loved her Sunday pasta dinners with the family. But for as long as she could remember, about an hour after those meals, she would feel shaky, exhausted, and oddly anxious, as though her body had just run a sprint she had not signed up for. But when Margaret began addressing the blood sugar swings behind those crashes, the Sunday dinners became enjoyable again, all the way through the afternoon. Same table, same family, very different experience. Many adults tell me they feel more in control when they can see the pattern written out clearly. So I created a simple, one-page protocol you can print and follow quietly at home. Before we get into the mechanics of what is happening, let us take a moment to understand why reactive hypoglycemia becomes so much more prevalent in the 50s and 60s specifically. Because many of the people who experience it today did not have this problem in their younger years. And that change is not random. After 50, the body's blood sugar regulation system operates with less precision than it did in earlier decades. Insulin sensitivity declines. The pancreas, which produces and releases insulin in response to rising blood sugar, becomes less precise in its timing and calibration. And the liver, which plays a central role in maintaining blood glucose balance between meals, becomes more reactive and less finely tuned in its responses. The result is a blood sugar regulation system that, while still functional, has lost some of the fine-tuned responsiveness it once had. It overcorrects more easily. It responds more dramatically to the same foods that once caused no noticeable effect. And the gap between a blood sugar spike and the crash that follows it becomes wider and more disruptive than it ever was before. Add to this the reality that many adults in their 50s and 60s are also dealing with fatigue, disrupted sleep, elevated stress, and reduced activity levels compared to younger years, all of which further compromise blood sugar regulation, and the conditions for reactive hypoglycemia are essentially set. Now let us walk through exactly what happens in the body during one of these episodes, because understanding the mechanism makes the experience feel less frightening and the solutions feel more logical. You eat a meal or a snack that is high in quickly digested carbohydrates. Pasta made from refined flour, white rice, bread, a sweet dessert. These foods are broken down into glucose rapidly, sometimes within 15 to 30 minutes of eating. That glucose floods into the bloodstream. Blood sugar rises quickly and steeply. Your pancreas detects this rapid rise and releases insulin to manage it. But here is where the problem begins for adults over 50. The system that once calibrated this insulin response with precision is now operating with less accuracy. The pancreas, sensing a significant glucose spike, sometimes releases more insulin than the situation actually requires. Think of it like a thermostat that has become oversensitive. The room temperature rises a few degrees, and the thermostat cranks the air conditioning to its maximum setting. The room overcools. In the body, this insulin overshoot drives blood sugar down below the comfortable range, but low enough that the brain and nervous system, which are acutely sensitive to drops in glucose, register the deficit and respond with alarm. And that alarm is what you feel as a reactive hypoglycemia episode. The shakiness comes from adrenaline being released to signal the liver to push glucose back into the bloodstream. The anxiety and unsettled feeling come from the same adrenaline surge. The mental fog and difficulty concentrating come from the brain's reduced access to its primary fuel. The sudden hunger is the body's urgent signal to take in more glucose and correct the deficit. And the fatigue is the exhausted aftermath of a hormonal storm your body just ran through, triggered by nothing more than a bowl of pasta or a slice of cake. This is reactive hypoglycemia. And once you have experienced it a few times, the pattern becomes unmistakable. It is worth noting that reactive hypoglycemia exists on a spectrum. Some adults experience it mildly, as a subtle afternoon tiredness or a vague irritability after certain meals. For adults managing pre-diabetes or early blood sugar concerns, reactive hypoglycemia can be particularly pronounced because the initial blood sugar spike after a high carbohydrate meal tends to be higher, which triggers a more significant insulin response, which produces a deeper and more disruptive correction. And there is a particularly frustrating cycle embedded in this experience. When the crash arrives, the body craves quick sugar. It wants the fastest glucose it can find, and so the person reaches for another carbohydrate, often a sweet one, which temporarily relieves the crash but sets up the next spike and the next overcorrection. The roller coaster continues, meal after meal, day after day. So what breaks the cycle? Let us talk about the practical, everyday foundations that make the most meaningful difference. The first and most direct intervention is changing what triggers the spike in the first place. Refined carbohydrates, white pasta, white bread, white rice, sugary desserts, sweetened drinks, and most packaged snack foods produce the fastest and highest blood sugar rises. They are the steepest on-ramps to the roller coaster. Reducing their portion size, choosing less refined alternatives, and most importantly, never eating them in isolation, makes an immediate and measurable difference in how severe the subsequent crash is. The key phrase there is never in isolation. You do not have to give up pasta entirely. You do not have to skip dessert at every family gathering. What you do is change the context around those foods. Eating pasta alongside a meaningful portion of protein, a grilled chicken breast, some shrimp, a generous serving of legumes, transforms the metabolic experience of that meal. The protein slows gastric emptying. It blunts the speed and height of the glucose rise. It moderates the insulin response. And the subsequent drop is gentler and more gradual, rather than steep and destabilizing. Adding vegetables adds fiber that further slows glucose absorption. A side salad with olive oil dressing before the pasta does something measurable and real. The fiber and fat in that salad create a buffer in the digestive tract that slows how quickly the pasta's glucose reaches the bloodstream. The spike is lower. The insulin response is smaller. The crash is softened. Portion size matters as well. A smaller serving of pasta, paired with abundant protein and vegetables, produces a very different blood sugar response than a large portion of pasta eaten as the primary component of the meal. You are not depriving yourself. You are rebalancing the plate. For dessert specifically, eating it at the end of a meal that already included protein, fat, and fiber is meaningfully better for blood sugar than eating something sweet on an empty stomach or as a standalone snack. The buffering effect of what came before it in the meal reduces the sharpness of the glucose spike that sweet foods would otherwise produce. Movement after meals is another powerful and underutilized tool for reducing reactive hypoglycemia episodes. A gentle 10 to 15-minute walk taken within 30 to 60 minutes of finishing a meal activates your muscle tissue in a way that allows it to absorb glucose from the bloodstream through a pathway that does not require insulin. This natural glucose clearance reduces the height of the post-meal spike before it reaches its peak. A lower spike means a smaller insulin response. A smaller insulin response means a shallower drop, and a shallower drop means either no crash at all or a much milder version of what you would otherwise experience. This one habit, a short walk after lunch or dinner on days when you have eaten pasta, bread, dessert, can be genuinely transformative for adults prone to reactive hypoglycemia. It requires only the intention to move for a few minutes at the right time. When cortisol is chronically elevated from poor sleep or ongoing stress, the initial blood sugar spikes after meals tend to be higher. the insulin responses more exaggerated, and the crashes more pronounced. They are central to reducing the frequency and severity of reactive hypoglycemia over time. Now let us discuss the nutritional gaps that may be making reactive hypoglycemia worse than it needs to be. Because even with the best dietary and lifestyle habits, the body's ability to regulate blood sugar precisely depends on having the right nutrients present at the cellular level. Chromium is a trace mineral that supports the efficiency of insulin receptors, helping glucose enter the cells more smoothly and reducing the overcorrection that drives reactive hypoglycemia. Many adults over 50 are not getting adequate chromium through their diet, and this deficit can quietly make the insulin overshoot more likely and more pronounced. Magnesium supports insulin signaling and glucose metabolism through multiple pathways. It also modulates the stress response, helping to dampen the adrenaline surge that makes reactive hypoglycemia episodes feel so uncomfortable. Low magnesium, which is remarkably common in adults over 50, makes the body more reactive and less capable of fine-tuned blood sugar regulation. Berberine has been studied for its ability to support healthy glucose metabolism and moderate the post-meal blood sugar response in ways that reduce the amplitude of the spike and crash cycle, reducing the metabolic disruption that follows blood sugar swings, enhancing how your body responds to the post-meal blood sugar swings that drive reactive hypoglycemia, and supporting a more stable and comfortable recovery after carbohydrate-containing meals. For those in similar situations, if you would like to explore what that kind of comprehensive nutritional support looks like, and what others managing reactive hypoglycemia in their 50s and 60s have found helpful, there is a resource in the description below where you can learn more at your own pace. Before we close, the important reminder. This video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Here is what I want you to carry with you from today. The crash after pasta or dessert is not weakness. It is not a lack of willpower, and it is not simply an unavoidable feature of enjoying food in your 50s and 60s. It is a biological event with a specific cause, a predictable pattern, and a set of practical, accessible responses that can genuinely change how you feel. You do not have to give up the foods you love. You have to change the context around them. Pair them with protein. Add fiber and healthy fat to the meal. Take a short walk afterward. Fill the nutritional gaps that are making the overcorrection worse. And give your body the environment and the tools it needs to regulate blood sugar with greater precision. Margaret got her Sunday dinners back. Fully. Comfortably. Without the crash that used to follow. That kind of improvement is not reserved for the fortunate few. It is available to anyone willing to understand what their body is doing and give it what it needs. Start at your next meal. Look at the plate. Add the protein. Take the walk. And notice what changes. Your body is ready to respond. Give it the chance. Thank you for being here with TrueWell Prime. Take good care of yourself today.